The Secrets of Middle-earth is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
You're listening to The Secrets of Middle-earth, where we discuss the hidden themes and deeper layers found in the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, whether in his writings or in any of the media derived from them. I'm Jeff Haecker, and joining me today on the panel are Thomas Salerno. Hi, Thomas.
Hello there, Jeff.
And Alix Murray. Welcome back.
Hi, Jeff. Good to see you.
You as well. Be sure to follow The Secrets of Middle-earth in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcast directory or app. And you can find us on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on Twitter/X, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, we were at StarQuest Network. And don't forget that you can get your own official Secrets of Middle-earth merch, including our awesome t-shirt at sqpn.com/merch. It's a great way for you to support the show and show your love for Tolkien and his wonderful world of Middle-earth. Today, we are discussing the second installment of the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Two Towers, since we just did Fellowship of the Ring. So I'll give a brief plot summary and we'll get into it. Frodo and Sam continue on their quest to destroy the One Ring. They encounter Gollum, who initially swears to obey Frodo and guide them to Mordor. They are found by Faramir of Gondor, who initially wants to take the ring as a weapon to Gondor, but overcomes the temptation to let them go, while Gollum plots to bring Frodo and Sam to the spider Shelob in order to get the ring. Meanwhile, Merry and Pippin are being taken to Isengard by Saruman's forces. They are tracked by Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, and eventually reunite with a resurrected Gandalf the White, who brings them to the kingdom of Rohan. Saruman targets Rohan, whose people flee to Helm's Deep, and there they fight and defeat the army of Saruman, while Merry and Pippin meet the Ents, who in response to Saruman's cutting and burning of forests, retake Isengard. I tried to make that brief, but for a 3 to 4 hour movie, but so hopefully got everything. But yeah, I just wanted to open it up, and I know we've probably all seen these movies a number of times over the last 20 plus years, but just wanted to get y'all's thoughts briefly on how do you like this one compared to Fellowship?
Who's going to start off?
Yeah, no, go ahead, Alex.
Well, do you know what? In some ways, I always think, oh, maybe I don't like The Two Towers as much as the Fellowship. As soon as the opening credits start, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love this so much. And I would have to say, I like them equally. I mean, I love the trilogy. I see it as one whole. And actually, this Christmas, as is our family tradition, we watched all 3 extended versions over the Christmas holidays. And it was like watching just one long film. It was fantastic. So I love them both.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Alex, that for me, it's just one long 9-10 hour movie. And, and as a whole, I just love it to death. And this was the first one, though, that I saw in theaters, because I think I mentioned in our last recording that I missed seeing Fellowship when it was in theaters. So I saw this one. I believe my aunt took me to see it, and I think my brother as well. And yeah, so I have a lot of fun memories in seeing this movie for the first time. I love how the beginning just connects to the previous movie by having the dream sequence flashback to the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. And while I do have, I think, the most issues with this particular installment, I just feel like, that when I'm looking at them as a whole trilogy, it's not like I'm really going to fault this one, like. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, whenever I watch one of them, I feel like it's like when we did the Fellowship a while back, I was like, I had to immediately go and keep watching the rest of them. And I have little kids right now, so I can't, it's hard to sit and watch one all in one run, all much less all of them. So hopefully one day I'll be able to do that.
You mean you don't make them watch it with you?
Well, they're pretty little, so they would. I mean, they could be in there with me,
excuse,
but
Jeff.
Well, they'd be in there with me, but then I wouldn't be watching it. I'd be they'd be talking at me or anything.
And the orcs might be a little bit much for very small children.
That's true. Yeah, the battle scenes and that sort of thing.
But yeah, no, I love them all. As well, and I don't know, like it's hard to rank them if I had to. I mean, I think I like Fellowship a little bit more than Two Towers. Just I think I like having everybody together, and and Two Towers, like I really like it. It's just, sometimes when I rewatch like the Frodo and Sam and Gollum parts, I'm like, ugh. It feels like, and it's kind of meant to convey that it takes a long time, and you're like, they're getting nowhere. And
and you know what? I think there's a loss of innocence in the Two Towers.
Yeah.
The first one, nobody had any idea of what was going to happen. I mean, Gandalf didn't know he was going to fall into the abyss. I mean, even some of these very seasoned, Aragorn being a very seasoned ranger, and Boromir and Legolas, and but even they were more innocent than they were in the Two Towers. They had definitely grown, and they experienced a loss that they had never anticipated, with Gandalf dying. And so I think you have that sorrow, and that, when it's part of growing up, like something happens and it takes it out of you. And I think in the Two Towers, there is that sense of loss, and cynicism is not the right word, but a loss of innocence. I guess that's the best way I would say.
Yeah. Because I mean, in the books, it's whenever the Fellowship goes all their separate ways, they call it the breaking of the Fellowship. And I mean, I think that's the title of like the scene if you go into like the DVD too. So yeah, it's definitely you lose that innocence, you lose that kind of sense of hopefulness, and you're like Sam and Frodo are two little hobbits are going to try to bring the One Ring into like the worst place on Middle Earth. And then you have Merry and Pippin. I was going to do the Legolas YouTube video of they're taking the Hobbits to Isengard. They're taking the Hobbits to Isengard. But yeah, no, yeah. So just I thought we could kind of highlight some of the some of the new characters that'll be some big players in the next couple movies as well. But I think the first one we meet is Éomer, the nephew of the King of Rohan, and this I think this is probably the first time I saw Karl Urban in anything.
Yes,
and I've just had a huge man crush on him ever since.
Did you like his Dr. McCoy?
I did
in the Kelvin universe. I did too. Yeah.
I thought he was great as Dr. McCoy. Yeah,
because he's immediately like he's kind of on par with or kind of at the same level as Aragorn, and like this kind of lordly guy who's, a leader of men, even though he's more of a military leader at this point than Aragorn is. Because Aragorn, in the books, Aragorn's leads the Rangers, but you don't really get as much of that sense in the films.
Wasn't Éomer like a prince? Wouldn't he be considered a prince? Yeah,
he would be because his brother was
the sister's son.
Yeah, Theoden's brother was, Theoden would have been the firstborn, so his father would have been like the prince of.
Éomer's the third marshal, so he's third in command after Theoden and his son Theodred. And something this movie does that, dare I say it, improves a minor flaw in Tolkien's book, in my opinion, which is we never meet or see anything about Theodred in the book. We're just told he died.
True.
And in the book, you could almost make Éomer Theoden's son and it would still work. Like, we're just told, and Theoden's son died. And we don't see any of that. Whereas in the film version, Éomer finds Theodred at the fords of Isen, brings him injured back to Meduseld, where the king lives. And then we see him die overnight probably poisoned by worm tongue. It's heavily implied. But I thought that sort of gave you a reason, like, and of course later they show the very moving scene of Theoden burying his son, and he gets choked up and he says no parent should have to bury their child. And that scene is not in the book. And I thought it was a very effective addition to the film.
And to flesh out the character of Theoden.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because if Theoden had been if Aemir had been Theoden's son, like because Aemir was kicked out, was, cast out with, by, at Wormtongue's prompting. So yeah, if he was his son, that probably wouldn't have happened. So I think there had to be that little bit of a little bit of separation of family. But I mean, in the movie, Theoden eventually, he doesn't really talk about Aemir as, he should have loved him as a son, but he talked about Eowyn as, a daughter. He should have loved her as a daughter. But yeah, we're talking about, since we kind of moved on to Theoden. I mean, I love his portrayal, and like the scene of him getting his Wormtongue and Saruman getting cast out, and Theoden kind of
the exorcism.
Yeah, exactly. I love that scene, and and I love Theoden in this and in the next one. I don't know which kind of portrayal I like better, but he has some pretty great scenes in both. But I mean, he's almost like he kind of waffles a little bit, at least in the film. So from between like, he's hopeful we're gonna outlast this army, to, oh no, we're all gonna die, we're doomed, and he kind of goes back and forth throughout the movie. And to be fair, the other characters do too. Like Legolas kind of despairs.
They do, Legolas kind of falls off the wagon a little bit. But I have to say, if I can say something about the Rohirrim, out of all of the race of men, they are my favorites. I love the Riders of Rohan. I mean, the Men of Gondor and the Rangers, I just can't relate to, but for some reason, and it's not just because they love horses. I mean, that's a bonus for me, but the way they were portrayed in the film, and I can remember reading about them before the film came out, and how I had in my head, they would be like, that's what they were in the film. And I love that when that happens. It doesn't happen often, but there's a way that Tolkien describes their culture. They're not a literate culture. So they have an oral history.
Yeah, they write no books, he says.
Yes. And their language is, I think he said it was a mixture of sorrow and joy or something. He described it beautifully. And I thought, and when I read that, I guess at the time my husband and I were dating, and I was like, that sounds like the Scottish accent, but that's, and it does, it's still, I think it's a lovely description of like maybe a Scottish accent, but also the way they described the hobbits. Well, I guess the way the culture is portrayed in the film, it is very Scandinavian. It's very Anglo-Saxon. And when we lived in Norway, after the film had come out, we'd moved after the film. Some of the way that the houses were built, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like my neighbor's house. So it was a little bit, took me out of Middle Earth in a way that I didn't want to be, but
your neighbor's house is like a mead hall or something.
Well, I say that, I'm exaggerating. We were right outside of Bergen, but if you went out into the country and stuff, you could see some of the old farmhouses with the roof pitches that were crossed. Actually, I've seen some here as well. So it was a little bit, I didn't like being taken out of Middle Earth and being plopped into where I was. But now looking back on it and watching it again, I actually become quite nostalgic for those years when we lived there. And on top of that, my love for the Rohirrim. And in terms of the Rohirrim, Theoden is one of my favorite characters in the whole trilogy. He is such... he's a leader, and he's so real in his leadership. When I was watching it last night, Yes, I had to watch it again last night. That was my excuse. This was my excuse, rather. And, he woke up in a world that he did not ever anticipate. What do you do? Like, this is not, and he said that these evil days should fall upon my house, that I should live to see these evil days fall upon my house. But he didn't go crawl under a rock. He struggled to try to get his bearings. And I think that's when he was getting wobbly and maybe, as you said, Jeff, maybe losing a little bit of hope. But I think it was just getting his bearings because, he was not supposed to bury his son. He wasn't supposed to have his people completely, or have some massive army come and wipe out all of his people. That wasn't part of his plan or anybody's plan, And he just worked with whatever he got. Like, okay, this is what I have. He got his bearings and then he worked with it. I love him.
Yeah. And I'm hoping great stuff on I think that the Rohirrim, the Rohan is kind of the closest we get to like the Vikings in, at least in the Lord of the Rings, with they're just very, like you said, they don't really have their oral history. They're, and a lot of their buildings look very similar. Like if you look at, interpretations of like Viking architecture and as we'll see in the next film, like the Mead Hall and very Viking.
I love that they have a solemnity to kind of everything they do and say, both in the films and the books. And it just like going to the Two Towers of the book for just a second, there's a scene where, of course, Éomer and Gimli have this kind of friendly rivalry. At first, not so friendly because Éomer, in Gimli's eyes, insults Galadriel and like calls her a witch and stuff. And so Gimli, when Éomer asks his pardon later, Gimli's like, if you ever have the chance to see the Lady Galadriel with your eyes, you shall acknowledge her the fairest of ladies, or our friendship will end.
Yeah.
And Éomer just goes, so be it. And I'm like, that's great. I love that. I love how solemn that was. It's just like...
They're very stoic people,
yes.
Just like the dwarves. I mean, I think they probably would get along very well. Yeah, they're very stoic.
Tolkien says they don't, like maybe because they're too similar. They rub each other the wrong way.
There are certain personalities that don't get along with the same personality.
The same type.
Yeah.
And so, the other Rohirrim character to mention, I think, is Éowyn, and she's the Shield Maiden. She wants to do what the boys are doing, and she doesn't want to be just a caretaker of with the women and the children in the cave. She wants to be fighting, which she does get to do. So she gets there. But just watching this movie, I'm like, man, Éowyn, just her and Aragorn, and Aragorn's kind of flirting back with her, so he's kind of leading her on a little bit.
Yeah, see, I didn't think that, but okay.
I love the bit where they discuss his age. That was very funny. And you cannot be 80. Yeah. He's like 87.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
that's so funny.
I wonder, at least in the film, if. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I wonder if in the film, at least they kind of did that because. At the time, Aragorn wasn't planning in the film to go back and be, get Arwen and be the king. He was just trying to, do his own thing. And so he thought, well, Arwen's going to go to the Undying Lands. So here's here's someone, a human woman that, I could be with, but, but he's still wearing Arwen, the Even Star Jewel. So like he knows, I think deep down, he knows he and Arwen are going to live together, live happily, ever after. But she was pretty cool in this. She doesn't really, like, you really get to see her more come into her own in Return of the King in the film. But she's already pretty fierce, and like she's practicing with the sword in the hall, and Aragorn kind of like is sparring with her a little bit, and she just has this look of serious, like, what, you want some of this? Like she's ready to go.
Yeah. I have to say, now, Thomas, I'm going to kind of join you in saying that I think the film improved on a character, and that was Éowyn. Now, I really loved Éowyn in the book. in the books. However, in this film, the way she was fleshed out and the way they developed her personality, there are not that many female characters in modern film that I relate to even remotely. Like I don't understand their motivations. I always tell my husband he's so lucky because if I will watch an action film, science fiction, or fantasy. I don't want to watch any kind of like chick flick romantic stuff because I don't get it. I don't understand that. Would never. Yeah, it's just a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. And Éowyn is a woman that I can respect from beginning to end. You know, one of the things that I really loved about her character was she clearly was drawn to Aragorn. She cared for her uncle. Like, she performed her duty.
Yeah.
And she did not act on her emotions. You know what I mean? She wasn't like, I don't know, you know, like getting all emotion and huffy and puffy, you know, and doing something that just makes no sense. And then somebody has to come and rescue her. I can't stand that. You know, she's like, she wanted to fight. And her uncle said, no, your duty is here. And so she's like, okay, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that's what you're supposed to be doing. And at the part where she realized there really was no chance with Aragorn, she's like, okay, I have my dignity and I'm going to go and fulfill my duties in life. I'm not going to try to, I don't know, change his mind with, you know, whatever womanly wiles I have. No, she's like, okay, fine. I get it. I'm moving on. So she was an excellent character and right. Quite, well, I guess we're not talking about Return of the King, but I loved her in that. Absolutely loved her in that.
You know, she loves her brother. She loves her uncle. She loves her cousin who passes away. She loves her people.
Yeah.
You know, she is loyal to family and country. And I think that's what's, you know, very, you know, she's not a character I think some people get Éowyn wrong. They think that she's motivated by some sort of selfish, you know, quest for glory.
No.
When she really just wants to do she wants to protect her family and her people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And at the end, and of course now talk about skipping far ahead, but you know, I think the decisions she makes are very consistent and they make sense, you know, in their world. And she's just, I absolutely love her. She's one of my most favorite characters ever, on screen and in a book.
Yeah. And so she listens in this one and the next one she doesn't, but then it turns out that's what needed to happen to.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
we can talk about that when we get to that one, but and so kind of the other character I thought to highlight that we haven't really talked about before. Gollum's obviously in here, but we did a whole episode on Gollum. So maybe if we have some time, we can discuss him. But the other one I was going to bring up was Faramir, who's the captain of Gondor who encounters Frodo and Sam. And one thing I found I thought was interesting, and it's been a long time since I've not watched the extended editions. I only watched those, but I didn't realize that the whole flashback with Boromir was not in the theatrical. Because you see, that kind of gives context to
it. Does,
and it kind of gives you more, you know, redeems Boromir a little bit. Like you can see that he was a good guy once, and he just had this temptation and this failing.
And that Boromir knew his dad was overbearing.
Yeah,
and that, like, you know, when he's celebrating with Faramir and they're drinking and celebrating with the men, and then Denethor comes along, you see Boromir just go like, "Oh no. Why do you have to come and ruin this?"
You know, like Denethor even more.
Yeah, I can imagine like he probably put so many expectations on Boromir and was constantly like,
"Yeah,
you know, he was
weird."
And then and I've speculated that maybe, you know, this is not based on anything, but maybe maybe Denethor kind of dogs on Faramir because he looks like his mom, who died
soon after childbirth.
So maybe it's like he kind of sees him as the reason that she died, and and reminds him of him every day. But anyway, that's just my personal speculation. But
I don't think that you're far off the mark. I certainly couldn't cite it for you now, but I seem to remember reading something like that.
Okay.
There was something about he blamed Faramir for, his wife's death or something. And
Faramir's temperament was more like hers.
Yes, it was.
And so she definitely reminds him, and it's just like, because I think deep down he blames himself.
Yeah.
Because if you read in the appendices, he brought, she was from the seacoast. She did not want to be in that city close to Mordor, and she kind of just wasted away, it's described. And it's like, and just her innate kind of depressive streak, got worse. And it's just, I think deep down, Denethor blames himself, but he's externalizing it to deal with that. He's externalizing it onto his son.
Yeah.
And it's just tragic all around.
And of course, he's dealing with, and again, this comes out in Return of the King. We don't know what the Palantir has been doing to his mind. How many years has he been staring into that thing? It could have been their entire lives of the two sons. And that's going to...
Did Denethor have one in the film? I thought in the film it was the one that they brought from they brought it from Isengard. In the book he may have, but I don't think in the film.
In the book he has.
Denethor had one.
That's one of the changes that I never understood. Maybe because they thought that by having more than one Palantir it would confuse people, but he just says that like he knows that Sauron's going to beat them in the end, and he doesn't say how.
Yeah, so maybe you could just imply that he had a Palantir.
Yeah, but at least for in this one, that was just an added scene we were discussing. But Faramir is just a great addition. The actor who's not been in too much.
Where I saw him
as much
once?
as like Sean Bean and.
Let me guess.
He was in the guy who played Faramir was in Van Helsing.
He was.
He
played the friar.
Yeah. And he was also in Iron Fist.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah,
that's the only reason I watched that. Yeah. And of course, he's in
I loved
300.
him in this, and he's. Yeah. Oh yeah. He was in 300. But yeah, in this, they added some stuff with him, like having more of a temptation with the ring and like kind of, because I think in the book, it's not, he kind of doesn't really try to take the ring or he doesn't really want to bring it to Gondor. He kind of accepts Frodo and Sam's, what they're doing is important. But in this, you kind of get that, he thinks he's going to take it and redeem himself and, honor his brother. And then Sam has to call him out and say, this is why your brother died. And then
I know
Faramir ultimately makes the right choice and lets them go.
He ultimately does make the right choice. And I think that's what some critics of the film don't see, is that in the end, he's tempted, but he makes the right choice. Whereas I understand why people, they think the film is tearing Faramir down. And a friend of mine, a philosophy professor named Andrew Snyder, recently wrote on his Substack a whole article called "Why Peter Jackson Did Not Fix "quote unquote" Faramir," because some people believe that the films fix him by making him more human, and I understand that. Like I do like the book version of Faramir better because, one, it's Tolkien's original vision of the character. And that, two, I understand that Tolkien was trying to make him the archetype of Arthurian chivalry. But I still don't think the movie, quote unquote, ruins Faramir like some people suggest. I think it just makes him a more complex character. That's all.
Agreed. Yeah. How do I say it? He's not, out of the two brothers, I actually like Boromir because Boromir is a little more manly. I don't know, but that's just a personality thing.
Tolkien points that out, that in the books, he says people judge Faramir as less masculine than Boromir because he likes to read and he likes music, whereas Boromir is just like beer and fight.
I know. I don't know if it's because, you have Sean Bean and he's just this iconic man's man kind of actor. And then I didn't know who this other guy was when the films first came out. And he was like the little brother. He was obviously, he definitely played second fiddle to his brother. But in the book, of course, his motivations were totally different. And so it would make sense that he wouldn't want the ring. He would immediately see the danger in taking the ring, whereas Boromir was not like a cultured man. I mean, he came from a very high culture, but he wasn't necessarily someone he was there to preserve everything like on a bigger scale. Whereas I think it even says in the Fellowship of, the Two Towers, that Faramir fought because he loved the culture that he came from.
Right.
If he didn't have to fight, he wouldn't. He'd be doing something else, whereas Boromir would be fighting. That's what Boromir wants to do.
That's his way. Like he I don't want to say he fights for the sake of it, but he would be bored stiff if Boromir would, if he wasn't doing deeds of martial valor. Whereas Faramir only does those things because they're necessary at this point in time.
Yeah, but he would much rather. In fact, I think it might have been in the Two Towers. It says that when he was a young boy and Gandalf had visited Gondor, he actually hung out with Gandalf.
Yes. Yeah. He learned things from him. He's definitely, and Tolkien has said this, that he put a lot of his own personality into Faramir. And that he's definitely that character who, like Tolkien himself, was swept up into a war he didn't really want to be a part of. He was in the Great War, and he's this literary, sensitive man forced to do ugly martial things, made ugly, especially in the Great War because of its mechanization and the total war aspect, where he saw, to use a Tolkienian phrase, he saw the deeds like shorn of their renown. He didn't see anything like praiseworthy in what was going on. And and Faramir is definitely that person who fights because he has to, but just wants to be living in peace, and
he'd rather be doing something else.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like Tolkien himself at that time.
Yeah.
And especially because I've been reading through Tolkien's letters, and at the time he was writing the Faramir scenes, it was, I think, 1944. And his son, Christopher, had been deployed with the Royal Air Force to South Africa. And he's writing all these letters to Christopher saying, I hate this war. I hate it. I hate that you've been swept up in it. I hate that we're using strategies that we should not against these people. I wish we would just fight for England instead of fighting to get back at people. And he's bearing his soul to his son about how the World War II is breaking his heart. And
because you're supposed to be the Great War, right?
The war to end all wars, right?
Yeah, and then
you can see the fact that it's happened again in his lifetime and has sucked up. And his son Michael was injured and is in the hospital, and he's just like, why is this happening again to us? And you can see that he poured all of that into Faramir.
Yeah, and just to go back to the film for a second, like I like how he's kind of the leader of Rangers, because I can't remember in the book they're kind of called Rangers, but they
Rangers,
kind of are. Yeah. So it's kind of like you get to see what those are like in the films, because the only Ranger we've seen up to this point has been Aragorn. We haven't really seen any of the other Dunedain, and we don't really. So you kind of get a sense of what the Rangers are. They're these hooded figures, running around with, keeping kind of the borders safe and
guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, very capable fighters as well.
Yeah, and so that just their little hideout was just a beautiful. It looks like the whole movie looks great, but like the waterfall, and I'm one thing I'm kind of bummed they cut is they didn't really have the window to the west, which is one of my favorite things in the book, where you kind of get the sense of the religion of Gondor, of that,
that's right. Yeah.
There's not much of a religion, but they know where they came from, and they kind of honor they were from Numenor before. And, but yeah, so unless anyone has anything else to say on Faramir, I was kind of just going to, highlight a couple things that and kind of we can talk about it is, and this film was more, action heavy in a lot of ways. Like, and Helm's Deep was in the book is like 20 pages. It's just a single chapter. In this, it's like, I always think of it being half the movie, like the actual battle, but it's really like, I guess, a quarter to a third of the movie.
Okay.
But yeah, I love the whole setup.
My favorite action scene in the trilogy. That's my favorite battle is Helm's Deep.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if I mean, it's hard to compare because I love them. I love this one, and I love the Pelennor Fields. But
I just like how I like the look of Sauron. I like the Last Stand aspect, that it's like the Spartans at Thermopylae, basically. And I think they even say, like, in the book it says there's 1,000 men there, but I think they even say in the movie we have 300 men. Yeah, 300 or something. So they definitely were trying to get you thinking of the 300 Spartans. And then also you just have, I like how, in terms of a bad guy army, how regimented and same the Uruk-hai of Isengard are. They all have the same armor, whereas like Mordor's forces are always more kind of, their gear looks very slapdash. Like Sauron doesn't really care about outfitting them with the best gear, because he knows they're expendable. Whereas Saruman he only has 10,000 of these guys, so he gives them only 10,000. Like Mordor has millions of orcs, but he only has 10,000, and so he outfits them with the best armor possible, and they carry those banners. I just think his army is very intimidating. And of course, I love their theme. The Uruk-hai marching music. Dun, dun, dun. I always, when I'm listening to the soundtrack, I find myself tapping my foot at those.
Oh my goodness. And I love the Rohirrim music. The minute
too. Yeah. And it's got that sort of Celtic, but also very Norse,
Yeah. It's a very lonely voice out in the, in the plains of Rohirrim. And I guess, again, why I get nostalgic. It's strange. When I lived in Norway, it's a very lonely country. There aren't a lot of people, and everyone's spread apart. And we lived halfway up a mountain, looking out on 3 fjords. And sometimes the only English I would hear was my 2 small children during the week, because my husband traveled so much. And so I spent a lot of very lonely days, and it's interesting how you get used to that, and hearing that music and seeing them kind of in the middle. Meduseld is just in the middle of this grassy plain, right? There's nothing around them. There's not, and that's their city.
Yeah. This palisade with some houses in it,
exactly,
and a meat hall at the top. Yeah. And
then, in the Westfold, that was just like, it looked like a small village someplace. So it was that loneliness that I definitely, and I say loneliness, I don't mean it in a negative way. I think it might be difficult if you're someone who can't stand their own company. I think there are a lot, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think, we are human animals, but I just happen to be one of these people. I can definitely stand my own company, probably for longer than I should, but looking out on that, yes, it was solitude. Solitude, and I do remember going out, on various veeks and just on the edge of fjords and not hearing anything but sea eagles, and having my children with me, and I do miss those days, and so looking at that, I really found myself homesick for Norway. Parts of Norway, not all of Norway.
I love the we kind of get to see the beginnings of Legolas can do anything. in this
Yes.
battle.
His elf eyes.
Yeah.
What do your elf eyes see?
Yes.
And like when he skateboards down the steps on the shield and takes guys out, like, which of course reaches its insane apotheosis in the Hobbit movies when he Mario jumps up the falling rocks and flies on the bat and whatnot. But the funny, like, you know, Legolas can do anything sort of thing starts here. And of course the game he plays with Gimli.
And all that's in the book.
Yeah.
I mean, even him, you know, sliding down the stairs on the shield. I mean, it looks like some Hollywood trope, but actually that's in the book.
I like too when the siege ladders come up. And Aragorn's like, ladders, and Gimli's like, good, you know, because now I can fight these people, you know,
exactly.
Like, and how and of course lest we forget the elves of Lothlorien who show up to aid the men, which is an addition, but I think it's really great because it's kind of hearkening back to the last alliance of elves and men, that they're loyal to the alliance, you know. And
can we just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
That's one thing I was going to bring up is that, like that, I know it's not in the book, but I love that scene.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because
I
think everybody, they're on their own. They think nobody's coming to help them. And they've even, I think at that point Theoden had said, where was Gondor when the Westfold fell?
Yeah.
You know, they had no allies that they knew of. And then all of a sudden you hear, and this is after kind of Legolas had kind of been despairing, and Aragorn said, I will die as one of them, probably freaking out all the men
what
in that
a thing
room.
to say in the language that everyone could understand. Yeah, like, why don't you just keep...
But then you hear the horn, and they're like, it's no orc horn, and they go, and they're running out, and you see the elves marching, and Theoden is just, I mean, everyone there is kind of awestruck of, like, because Theoden may not have ever seen an elf except for Legolas, and all of a sudden here's this army, and they're like, how is this possible? And I love it. Yeah, it's echoing back to the last alliance and the, you know, we've come to honor that allegiance. And and just I love that. I love that so much, and I hope that's something in Rings of Power we kind of get to see that the last alliance kind of take shape in the show. But and then unfortunately, I mean, it seems like all the elves die there. Unfortunately,
I
don't. A lot of them do.
Haldir, and you don't really see any of them left in after the battle or in Return of the King. So I'm kind of thinking they all. Yeah,
I'm trying to think. I don't know if they were in the Great Hall. I mean, I know Legolas
I don't
was
think
there,
they were.
But,
I think they've gone to the halls of Mandos at that point.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me about the film and this whole thing was how negative Elrond was. I think this in this film, you had a lot of people wavering between despair and hope. Everybody, you know, Legolas, and except for Aragorn. But I think he was given something, perhaps grace from Éowyn, you know, when he fell off the cliff and his suddenly his horse makes it down the cliff and finds him, whatever. But
the fake out death.
And then Brago,
it was his Theodred's horse that found him.
Brago.
Right, Brago.
His horse.
Yeah.
But Elrond, so I'm going to say maybe Éowyn passed on some grace to Aragorn so that
you mean Arwen?
Arwen, sorry, yes.
They're very similar.
I know, like that's not confusing.
And I was like, did Éowyn do something? Like, does she have grace to give?
No, so I think that, you know, when she was like, he was sleeping and, you know, had this dream, and but when Elrond came in, he was like so negative about everything, and he even said to her, he kind of echoed what Sauron said to Frodo in the first time Frodo put on the ring. There's nothing in the void, only death. And Elrond said, there's nothing here for you, only death. He's like echoing Sauron.
Wow, I never noticed that before.
Yeah, and I'm like, why are you so down on this? I guess he was maybe being hyperbolic just to get her to leave. I don't know.
Because they didn't have their mithril yet from
the healing mithril.
That's it. Oh my gosh.
I had to go there.
Oh gosh.
And one cool thing about that scene that I noticed on this watch, because we're also, for this podcast, we're also reading the Silmarillion and recording on that. Arwen name drops the Valar in this, and I think it's the only time they mention that word in the films. We hear Morgoth, we hear that name in Fellowship, but it doesn't really. We don't really get anything on who Morgoth is, and really his name was Melkor before he was Morgoth. So I just thought that was a cool like name drop of the Valar, because if you've never read the Silmarillion, you don't know what that is. But
yeah. Oh wow, I think I missed that. I need to go back. Do you mean I need to watch this again?
Oh no, yeah, it's when he's like in the water, and she says something like, may the grace of the Valar be with you, or I didn't write down the quote. But
that's it. So there was some kind of grace that she gave him, and he didn't lose hope, because everybody at some point was wavering in their hope. Yeah.
And ultimately, I mean, in the battle, it seems like all is lost. They've had to retreat back to the keep. And Alex, I think you had something on Theoden here.
Yes. So my favorite character, and he just makes the best speeches. Does he not?
He does.
I mean, he just, and so in the film, I have to bring this up close so I can see it. He says, Gamling is putting his armor on him, and they just think all is lost. And Theoden says, "Where now the horse and rider? Where is the horn that was blowing? Where is the helm and the hauberk and the bright hair flowing? Where is the hand on the harp string and the red fire glowing?" This is a bit longer than it was in the film. They just do a little bit of his quote. But years ago, I bore my children with Anglo-Saxon poems and things like that. And there is a poem called The Wanderer. And it's definitely worth reading. It's written by Anonymous, and Anonymous has written some pretty amazing poems in his lifetime. But it's an Anglo-Saxon, kind of a long poem, and it's about a warrior talking about how he feels lost because his chief has died, and his lord has died, and he doesn't have any place to go. But in the end, he resolves like he'll follow Christ. So that's the gist of this poem. But in the middle of the poem, of this Anglo-Saxon poem, it is, "Where has the horse gone? Where are my kindred? Where is the giver of treasure? Where are the benches to bear us? Joys of the hall to bring us together? No more the bright goblet, all gone, the mailed warrior, lost for good, the pride of princes. How the space of years has spread, growing gloomy beneath the night helm, as if it never was." So I think that was a little bit of an inspiration.
Well, I just looked up I just Googled this poem, and for what it's worth, on the Wikipedia page, it does say that Tolkien intentionally adapted it.
Okay. So there you go.
The Lament of the Rohirrim.
Yes. Yeah. So he definitely, so that's, again, we are supposed to think about the Anglo-Saxons and the Scandinavians and that sort of thing. And there is like a little bit of a sorrowful note, I think, in those cultures. I think it's because of the winters that they experience. You have this stoic approach to life, but he's just, I think Theoden is such a remarkable character. All of the Rohirrim are, quite frankly, except for Wormtongue. We haven't talked about him.
Yeah, that's right. Grima
Wormtongue.
Sire.
And do you know what? I was thinking,
who in the end kind of redeems himself too. So
in a backwards way. Yeah.
Somebody.
Well, the thing is, as I was watching it yesterday, and then that actor, Brad, what is his name? He is so good at playing weird characters. He's, of course, not Thufir. Oh, gosh. The Mentat in Dune, the 1980s Dune.
In the original one.
Okay.
Yeah. And he was Piter de Vries. And he also played...
Was he? Okay.
And he played like a psychotic Beta Z in Voyager. So he kind of does these really quirky, interesting characters. he does such an excellent job as Wormtongue. He, to me, looked like one of the, I think it's called a blue-tongued gecko or blue-tongued lizard.
He did, yeah.
That's what he looked like.
Yeah.
The way they did his makeup and everything.
Wasn't his tongue like actually like blue? Like,
it was
it was something.
or,
They
yeah,
did
it was something up with his tongue. Yeah.
And he looked very reptilian.
Yeah. Well, he had black hair, like white skin, like blue eyes,
yellow teeth,
he was almost like Gollum in that way.
He was.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me, it's like he didn't even look like a Rohirrim. So he wasn't even interested in being a part of his culture. He clearly had left them a long time ago. So he was clean shaven. If they were typically golden haired, he was probably dyeing his hair dark.
Or he had Dunlandish blood. Like some Rohirrim
that
did.
could have been a possibility. But even I was looking at his outfit. I'm like, what is that black lace thing you've got going on under that fur? So he had completely cut himself off from his people to where he didn't even look like them anymore. And I just love when after Theoden is cured of this curse they never say how long he'd been under that curse, but obviously for a while.
Yeah.
And he kind of grabs his sword and then he just pauses and it comes into his mind about Wormtongue and he just looks at him. And the next thing you know, Wormtongue goes flying out the door of the Great Hall. Yeah. And I think Bernard Hill did such a great job as Theoden, and he just looked like this old warrior king. And, but I think one of the things that I think the actor Brad, I can't remember his last name.
I think it's Dourif, maybe.
Dourif or something.
Dourif.
Yeah. When he was like, when he was talking to Saruman, as Saruman is like putting the bomb together and, he's hanging over it with a candle. And he asks Saruman, like, how are you going to defeat Helm's Deep? Nobody's ever done that. And, and he goes, with my army. And he goes, my lord, there is no such army. And then they go out and then there are all these people.
You hear what the orcs are saying? No. Sharku. Black speech for old man.
Oh,
which of course becomes Sharky.
Yes.
Later.
Again, I'm going to have to watch this again. I didn't realize I'd missed
That's what the orcs are chanting.
Sharku.
I thought they were saying just like Saruman, but I like that better.
Sharku. That's so cool.
But
yeah. But I think that's the only time when you see Wormtongue looks like he's regretted what he's done. He's just got a little tear in his eye.
Yeah.
Like he realizes what he's done. And can I point something else out? Mm-hmm. Again, this is like Alex's big promo of Theoden. I just love him so much. So in the film, when he said, we are all heading to Helm's Deep, that's where we're going. And they're like, you've got to fight. You've got to do this. And he's like, no, everyone's going to Helm's Deep. If he had not taken his people to Helm's Deep with that army that was coming, they would have been wiped out.
Yep.
They would have been utterly wiped out.
And I mean, even at the end, just to get to the last part of Helm's Deep, when Theoden's, like you said, he's pretty much given up hope, and Aragorn kind of gives him let's ride out one last time, and then Aragorn remembers on the Gandalf's on the light of the fifth day, look to the east, and and they charge down and are knocking the orcs off the bridge, and then all of a sudden you see Gandalf on the crest, and he says Theoden King stands alone, and then Éomer, who got kicked out, pops up, and like almost have a tear in my eye thinking about it, like. And then the Rohirrim all charge the Uruk-hai, and
I get chills whenever when Theoden says the horn of Helm Hammerhand shall sound in the deep one last time. I always I get bodily chills.
And of course, Gimli gets to go climb up the thing. And
you know what? That's just like so. I mean, I'm not a man, but. That to me is like that's like all man stuff. I love it. I love it. I would be like maybe this is why I like Eowyn, because I'd probably have my my helmet on or something. I just think that's so cool. Like, and they're like, ride now.
Yeah.
It's so exciting.
We haven't even touched on Merry and Pippin in the end.
We have not. Oh, yeah. We're going to have to talk a little bit about them.
Yeah. I was kind of disappointed with how, and I know they did it for dramatic reasons, whereas first the Ent's like, oh, we aren't going to do anything about it. And how they spend forever trying to figure out whether Merry and Pippin are orcs or not, whereas in the book that's resolved very quickly. And it's
it is. And it's and
also, no quick beam. I would have liked to have seen quick beam.
Yeah. To have him kind of with them when they were drinking the Ent draught.
The Ent draughts.
But I think one of the things, I love the Ents.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do in Isengard, I think, is excellent. That whole scene. But how Pippin, when he really matured very quickly under the captivity of the orcs. There was a lot where a lot could happen, and Pippin just kind of he remains Pippin, messing around, even though, my messing around caused the Balrog to come and in Moria. He still kind of had that part of his personality. It started to wear away, I think, under the captivity of the orcs. And then when Merry said there won't be a Shire, when at first when the Ents decided, well, we're not going to go, and Pippin goes, well, we can just go back to the Shire, and Merry's like, no. So Merry has always been a little more worldly wise than Pippin, but Pippin is getting there. And when he said to Treebeard, let's go south, because the closer we are to danger, the further we are from harm. And he's like, that makes no sense to me, but you are very small. And so when they get to Isengard and Treebeard sees, I guess, the desecration of the forests, and he gets upset, then he decides to fight. But then suddenly all of these Ents are with them. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Where did they come from? Were they just like, is everybody walking together to take Pippin and Merry to the Shire? That was a bit of I don't know. That should have been resolved, I think, a bit. It just didn't make sense, but I went with it because I read the book and that battle was really amazing. I will say this about Fangorn Forest. I kind of wanted it to be weirder. In the book, remember how when the three hunters were sitting under they had made a fire one night.
Oh, yeah.
And the tree leaned down and it opened up its dry leaves and the leaves looked like human hands. I just wanted it to look like that. And it wasn't really, it was just a forest. I mean, and they had some moaning and groaning, but it wasn't that strange. I just wish that it had been stranger than it was.
You get stuff like, what do trees have to talk about?
Yeah, the consistency
of squirrel droppings.
Exactly. Yeah, there's not a lot. And what I think is so funny, if you read anything about mycology or plant life, they really are talking to each other.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The fungal kind of
and they probably are talking about the consistency of squirrel droppings, but so Tolkien was way ahead of his time. But I think I guess we really haven't talked about the Ents or Treebeard and all of that. A lot happened in this film.
A lot goes on.
A lot was going on, whereas I think the Fellowship was more linear. This had all kinds of things happening because everybody was split up, as you said earlier.
Right.
Everybody was having a particular experience, and we haven't even really talked much about Frodo and Sam and Gollum and
Passage of the Marshes.
Yeah.
And it's so crowded with things. They decided to to cut the final chapters of the book, the going through Cirith Ungol and the attack by Shelob, and put those in the third movie, as if that movie wasn't overcrowded enough with stuff.
That's true. But it did. Do you know what? But that's a great opening.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That was a great opening. And then they even kind of split them up again. But I think, gosh, I'm trying to think of some other things. Well, I guess we did touch on with, I think the least interesting part. Well, I won't say least interesting. I only say it because it was the most depressing, was everything that was happening with Frodo, Sam, and Gollum.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why sometimes when I watch, like, I just watch the Helm's Deep part and I watch the Merry and Pippin part, and I kind of will skip over some of the Frodo and Sam.
Skip over the sad stuff.
Even though there's some great lines,
like talking to himself. That the one scene where now there's that meme where he goes like, you don't have any friends. Nobody likes you.
Exactly. Like, I say that to my dog sometimes. Nobody likes you. But one of the things about, if we could just touch on with the Frodo, Sam and Gollum experience, I think one of the difficult things to see was how the toll the ring was taking on Frodo.
Yeah.
That's depressing. And I wrote down as I was watching this, I don't think Gollum is, I think if you have somebody who's struggling with some kind of addiction, that character is not someone to look, I guess, unless it's like a cautionary tale, but he is not a character of hope. The number of times that he tried really hard to break away from the ring and he couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. That was depressing. And then Frodo being pulled in by the ring, being slowly taken over himself. And I would say, I wrote down that it was only because he was an exceptionally virtuous character that he was able to make it as far as he did. And of course, Sam was as well. But I think Frodo was even more virtuous than Bilbo. I don't think Bilbo was a particularly virtuous character. He lied. He was stealing. He wasn't. Yeah. He put the ring on.
So
he was a burglar.
I like Bilbo, but he's. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he wasn't like, oh, I want you to be like Bilbo. No, I mean, but Frodo, you could go, yes, Frodo is a very strong character. And in terms of his virtues, as is Sam. And it took the two of them together to get that ring to Mount Doom.
Well, and if you ask one of our previous panelists, Thomas Sanherho, about it, Gollum is the ultimate hero, because
I know. Did I tell you?
Because Frodo wasn't going to throw the ring in, and I think it's kind of implied that no mortal, or not, or even a mortal, like no creature could do it. Even someone like
it had
Gandalf
to be Eru Iluvatar who kind of
it had to be the wolf of
him,
Iluvatar.
like you could see him just ting with his finger. Yeah, but it's funny. When I went to the lecture at the Oratory in Birmingham, I did pose Thomas's theory that Gollum was the hero because he destroyed the ring, and needless to say, this Oratorian was not impressed.
We'll have to tell Thomas
with
about
his
that.
Reasoning. Yeah. He said only because it would only have been virtuous if the motivation behind destroying the ring was a virtuous motivation, and it wasn't. It was just Eru Iluvatar thumped him into Mount Doom. And he was there at the right place or wrong place, as however you want to see it. But I think, what else did I have here? Well, and I was, and I wrote that I think Eru Iluvatar had a hand in choosing the ring bearer. Which Gandalf refers to when he's sitting in the mines of Moria. So I think watching, and the way it ended, it just kind of left you hanging, this movie, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Especially when you were in the cinema and you knew you had to wait at least another year to find out what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so it kind of ended on a little bit of a down note.
The song is so depressing that it ends. If you listen to the lyrics, it's called Gollum's Song.
Well, there you go.
So, and it's all about how, I tried, but
This is why I'm saying, like, if you're struggling with something, you should not be looking at Gollum unless it's a cautionary tale. And also, the only person who ever showed any kind of kindness to Gollum was Frodo. Mm-hmm. Bilbo showed pity, as did the elves. And, well, I would say, now I'm getting into the book as well, but the only person who ever showed kindness to him was Frodo. And I think, I don't know if it was in the book or maybe it was somebody else had posed this question about if Sam had been kinder to Gollum, maybe Gollum would have been able to find the strength between these two virtuous characters to not become virtuous himself, but to be less vicious. But he never had that opportunity because, as Frodo said, Sam was always running him down and calling him names. So that's a cautionary tale.
In the book, that's made even more explicit, where I think it's in the Two Towers book where, Gollum is on knife's edge of maybe turning over a new leaf, and Sam calls him a sneak.
Yes. Yeah.
And then from that point on, Gollum is just working to betray them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really sad.
It is. Gollum is, I know you've already done an episode on him. I think he's not my favorite character, but he is, he's a fascinating and complex character. And the fact that he's been written he's such a difficult character, and that Tolkien has written him so well that he just stays with you.
Yeah.
You think, gosh, what would I have done with somebody like that? How impossible to be dealing with somebody like that all the time.
And Andy Serkis's performance is just mind blowing.
He's Gollum. He's Gollum.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what we kind of all said when we did a Gollum episode, or we did in the past. We've kind of said like he's Gollum for forever. Like even if they remake the films or whatever, he's always going to be
Gene Wilder
Gollum.
Is always Willy Wonka. Sorry, Johnny Depp. Sorry, Timothy Chalamet. You are no Gene Wilder.
It's like, I do appreciate.
You are no man. You are no Gene Wilder.
Yeah. I do appreciate in the animated Hobbit movie how manic Gollum is. Yeah. I appreciate that it's different. And it obviously came before these films, but yeah, the Peter Jackson film version is the definitive Gollum pretty much.
Yeah. And he's a heartbreaking character. He's so difficult. Like, he's not likable, and he just nothing. Yeah. He's so,
but I quote him constantly, yet he's not.
Yeah. Don't we all? No, but he's So I think to be ending with that and with him really saying, okay, I'm going to take her, she can do it.
She can.
Whatever he does. Yeah. How he's so twisted. And, I guess I should just end with this one. One of the best things with Andy Serkis, that performance when the Rangers find him in the sacred pool. Ooh. And he's like in a corner crying and comforting himself. And
they're just gaslighting himself. Yeah.
Yeah. I told you he was tricksy.
Yeah. It's so disturbing.
It was. And you can tell, like, they're looking like, what is this? And it was, and he kind of scared them. And then Faramir, who is a man of honor, a man showing his worth, he was very cruel to him in the end. He didn't need to do what he did.
Right, yeah.
He really didn't.
And to him, he's just like, it's this weird thing that we found. He doesn't see the shreds of humanity that are left.
Not at all. The only person who ever saw that was Frodo.
On that light note.
On that happy note.
Yeah, we kind of ended this the way the
film does. Yeah.
Hang in there. Well, Sam makes his great speech. Although we do have
Sam's speech.
Yes. Hold on, there's some good in the world.
And the tales that really matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I think that's it for this episode of The Secrets of Middle-earth. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make this show possible, including Chow F., Kyle C., Molly N., James K., and Kenneth P. Their generous donations at sqpn.com help us to continue to create the Secrets of Middle-earth and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them at sqpn.com/give. Now we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. What do you think about the Two Towers? You can let us know on our Facebook page or on Twitter, or by sending an email to middleearth@sqpn.com, by leaving us a comment on YouTube, or by visiting our channel on the StarQuest Discord server at sqpn.com/discord. And join us next time for our continuing discussion of the Silmarillion. And coming up next month as well, we will be having our second Reading Day special. So until then, thank you, Alix, for joining and sharing the Secrets of Middle-earth.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
And Thomas, thank you as well.
Thank you, Jeff. I really enjoyed it.
And once again, I'm Jeff Haecker. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Middle-earth on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest network you're sure to enjoy. The Secrets of Technology. Find it wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology.